Hello and welcome to my first ever video summary. I have made a video where I compared 4 different AI models to see which one is the best Solana developer. And because that video got pretty long with 1 hour and 20 minutes, you're getting this additional video here where I just mention the key points. So, what I did is I compared ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok, and Claude. I gave them the same prompt to write me a simple Solana escrow program, and all of them managed to do it, but they all came up with slightly different program designs. So let's have a look at that. Starting with ChatGPT, which was the only one that was writing a native Rust program. All of the other ones used Anchor directly. And the program seems fine, but it did not manage to figure out my dependency issues. So then I made it write an Anchor program, which functionality-wise also worked. It does store sender, receiver, amount, and bump, and it does use a PDA. But in the first iteration, it didn't close that PDA, which if the same user deposits to the same receiver again, then this is gonna fail. But for one single deposit, it works. The PDA is being created and the receiver can withdraw from it, but the account is kept alive. It did mention that it can improve that and that I should add this close constraint here. And it came up with that itself. I didn't have to tell it to do that. But it didn't put it in the first version. And it also did not manage to work with the kit. It was mixing Web3 and kit and just didn't figure out how to work with it properly. It also didn't correctly derive the PDA. That just didn't work. Also working with those buffers, that stuff doesn't work. And putting the numbers for roles, even though it puts the correct ones, but it doesn't look as good as if it was using those constants. And here it still has the wrong type. I would need to do something like this. So yeah, it would have taken a bit more time to get it all to work, but I stopped after 1 hour and I had a working program and some anchor tests. But the overall experience was meh. So that was ChatGPT. I also tried Grok, which created an anchor program from the start. Grok came up with a design that none of the others did, where it creates one account per receiver and not per deposit. So several deposits from different senders would use the same account, which is a fair choice to make. And it does use this close constraint to reclaim all of the lamperts from that account. And it's being efficient in that it doesn't store anything in the vault account other than the lamperts directly and the account discriminator because it's using Anchor. So yeah, simple program, worked out of the box, except for this init if needed where I had to import Anchor with that feature. And also Grok didn't really manage to come up with tests using the kit. It was mixing Web3.js and the kit and it just didn't work. But it could write some tests with Anchor, even though it didn't get the expected and actual values correct in the tests. The functionality was still there, the account was created and could be withdrawn from. Overall with Grok it was a slightly better experience than with ChatGPT, but still couldn't get it to work with the kit. So that's Grok. Then Claude also wrote an Anchor program, decided to store the depositor, receiver, amount and bump, same as Chat. And Claude made this a full-on project with events and it wrote me a README explaining the architecture and how that stuff works, how to build it and everything. It used custom errors. So this one was kind of the biggest production, but it made a weird choice in my opinion at the withdraw where it puts the rent back to the depositor, which in a way makes sense because the depositor is the one paying the rent. But really, in my opinion, you wouldn't need to include that account in that transaction. And the optimal solution in my eyes would be to have the rent be part of the deposit amount in the first place. So you don't need to deal with rent separately. So yeah, I even let it write additional tests, which all worked fine. But then here we see when we withdraw from this vault account, the 0.1 that got deposited gets to the receiver and the rent goes back to the depositor, which for other programs might make sense, but for this vault, I personally just don't like it, but it's a choice that Claude made. And overall, it was really nice to work with this. except it also didn't really manage to work with the kit because it didn't really know how to get transaction signatures in there. And also the code it wrote, it kind of understands the kit, but it doesn't look like the cleanest code here either. It doesn't follow the conventions of how to code with a kit. And it is missing the add signers to instruction. So yeah, that didn't work, but it did manage to write proper tests. And overall, the program is pretty nice. So that's Claude. And then Gemini also wrote an anchor program. It implemented a design where each deposit has a deposit ID that you can pick. And so there's one account being created per deposit. And then you also need to know this deposit ID in order to withdraw it. The escrow account does store the sender, the recipient, and this deposit ID. Doesn't store the amount, which in my opinion is the right way to go about this because the amount is in the Lampert's field anyway. There's no reason to save that separately. And it also stores the bump, which is good practice, but all of them did that, so that's cool. But the one thing that set Gemini apart from all the other models that I used was that, for one, it understood that I can use Kodama to create a Kodama IDL, and it wrote me a script how I do that, and then it was using the generated code to properly work with the kit. So Gemini was the only one who really managed to work with the Solana kit, and it showcased a deposit and withdrawal. And here you can also see Gemini decided that the rent can go to the receiver as well. So in conclusion, in this test, I was most satisfied with Gemini, but we have to say that it was only a single example, and there are several more nuances with this. But if you want to know the full story, you can watch the entire video that I made. This was just the short version. So let me know down in the comments if you enjoy a short video like this. Should I make this for every video that I post? Do you just want the short version? And on the topic of AI models, which one is your personal favorite? Which one do you work with? And are there other ones that I should include in my next tests? Please do let me know, and then I will see you in the next one.